for your homework assignment. So I'm going to do a quick tutorial for your homework assignment, assignment 3.2, the third chapter of Grasping God's Word in the workbook. And in this homework assignment, you are to make observations as it pertains to some of the items that you find in the third chapter. And just a summary here on page 57. Again, I'm dealing with the second version, second edition rather. And there's a list that really carries over from last chapter to this chapter, but some of the new stuff is dialogue, question and answer, meaning if something, how something is done, purpose or result statements, general to specific statements, conditional clauses, actions and roles of God, action roles of people, and emotional terms. Now, I didn't find too many emotional terms in the assignment, but here on the screen, here are some of the observations I made. I made probably 45 observations, but I skipped over quite a bit as well. So this isn't exhaustive, but I think in your homework assignment, you should hopefully be able to come up with at least 40 that I seem pretty easy. And I'm just going to go over those quickly. Now, again, we're looking at things from a paragraph level, not a sentence level or just one verse level like we did last time. But even at that, we still need to look at verbs and verbals, and there's a lot of verbals in this assignment here. As you can see, I have here, if it's a verbal, I kind of coded it VBL. And if it's just a flat out finite verb, I just put a V over the top of it. So every verb, and this is how you kind of want to do it when you're doing observations, even in a Bible study, is you want to kind of code things. So all my verbs, I put squares around. And then there is a lot of repetition. If you look at the verse here, foolishness is repeated, as well as wisdom. Those words are repeated. And so I just kind of underlined one and circled the other. And then the conjunctions I circled, and I kind of listed what that conjunction was doing. For instance, the conjunction for. Anytime you see for, I'll say anytime, most of the time when you see for at the beginning of a verse, it's explaining something that was just previously said. So if you want to look what was being previously said, you have to go to verse 17 to understand what's being explained in verse 18. So you just kind of want to pay attention to those things. Here's a conjunction, the conjunction but, and this is showing contrast between two things. It says, for the message of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing, but, now here's the flip side, to us who are being saved, it is the power of God. So you kind of see the contrast there. Those who are perishing and those who are being saved. You say, well, now what are verbals? And what's the difference between a verbal and a verb? Well, a verb, a finite verb, are just basic verbs. Basically like this, I will destroy. Now it's a future tense verb, and it's just that. It's just a simple verb. Verbals are things like infinitives and things like participles. And so this verbal here in verse 18, who are perishing, in the Greek is a participle. Okay, so it's describing, participles are verbal adjectives. So it's describing something about someone else. What is the person doing? Well, they're perishing. So you're describing a person through the action. So that's how you can identify them. Who are they? Oh, those are the ones that are perishing. So those are participles. They're verbal adjectives. So it's describing the actions of someone. The man running over there. Okay, that's a participle. Now an affinitive, the main kickoff to affinitive, if you want to be able to identify an affinitive in the English, is let's go down here to verse 21, and you'll see to save. Now, so when you see to in a verb, it's an infinitive. It's an infinite verb. And so let's read it here. It says that God was pleased through the foolishness of the cross, or through the foolishness of what was preached, to save those who believe. So to save, that infinitive is really completing the thought of what was being preached. What the purpose of preaching? The purpose of preaching is to do what? To save. So it's kind of complementary, if you will. And so that's the kind of difference between a verb and a verbal. And again, when you look at the verbs, be sure really to try to identify the tense of the verb. Is it present tense, past tense, or future tense? And then the voice of the verb, is it active or is it passive? Now remember, active verbs is the subject is doing the verb. A passive verb is where the subject is receiving the verb. So there you want to kind of keep track of that as well. We can add on another element to the verbs, if you will. A verb can be either, how do I want to put it? It can be either perfective or imperfective. And so you got to ask yourself, is that verb, is it completed or is it still acting? So a lot of your present tense verbs, if you say, oh, that verb is present tense, that means it's imperfect. Okay, it's an imperfective aspect because it's still going on. If a verb is in the past tense, in the Greek we call it aorist. If it's in the past tense, then it's a perfect verb because it's a perfective aspect because it's something that's already been fully completed. So you can even begin to ask yourself about what kind of an aspect is it, imperfective or perfective or stative? Is it in the state of something? And the more we get into this, more we'll talk maybe a little bit more about verbs. The verbs are really, again, it's where the action's at, figuratively and literally, and it's important to understand. So, you go through and you look at the verbs, at least the verbs I've seen, they are plenty. Most of them are verbs. There are a few verbals. And sometimes in English, you don't know, it doesn't really, you don't know if it's an infinitive or not. It's sometimes looking at it in English, so that's fine. If you don't catch an infinitive, you call it a finite verb. It's no big deal. So something else I've seen in here is God's action. Again, so one of the things you want to look at is the action and roles of God, according to the list in your textbook. And so what's the action of God? We'll look at verse 19. For it is written, I will destroy the wisdom of the wise and the intelligence of the intelligent. I will frustrate. So that's something God will do. He's going to destroy the wisdom of the wise, and he will frustrate the intelligence of the intelligent. And then there's a list. If you go down to verse 22, I seen a list. Where is the wise man? Where is the scholar? Where is the philosopher of this age? Again, that's a list of what people in that day would consider wise people or intelligent people. And then so you have the answer here. So you have I kind of have it labeled here, question, and then the answer. And then there's a general to specific. The general statement is this: has not God made foolish the wisdom of the world? Well, what's the specific then? He goes on to define the wisdom of the world, right? For since in the wisdom of God, the world through its wisdom did not know him, God was pleased through the foolishness of what was preached to save those who believe. So you go from a general idea to more of a specific idea. That's the only one I've seen in here. Now, there's a couple comparisons. If you look at comparisons, there's some things being compared. First of all, what kind of jumps off the page at me when I was just kind of looking for simple observations is the wise and foolish. Okay, those are repeated words, but also they're constantly being compared. Okay, so that's a comparison. If you go down to verse 22, I have a comparison there as well. For the Jews demand the miraculous signs, and the Greeks look for wisdom. So there's a comparison between what the Jews are looking for and what the Greeks are looking for. So there's a comparison as well. And there's another comparison I've seen down in verse 25. It says, for the foolishness of God is wiser than man's wisdom, and the weaknesses of God is stronger than man's strength. So again, the comparison between God's wisdom and man's wisdom, God's strength and man's strength. So you see that comparison there. And so these are some general observations that I've seen, some things to look at. Again, if we're looking at it through the scope of a paragraph, the things that we're looking for can't be really accomplished in one sentence. And so that's the things that we're looking for, things that can't be found in one sentence. You need more than one sentence to find a comparison. You need kind of more than one sentence to have a general to specific. Okay, so these are the kind of things, a comparison, These are the kind of things that you want to look for at a more of a paragraph level when you're studying the Word of God. Now, I think next week we're going to talk about, in chapter 4, we're going to talk about discourse. And there we're kind of be going into longer paragraphs, okay? Sometimes even chapters when you start getting into narrative, okay? A narrative or storytelling, the historical books, whether it be the Pentateuch, whether it be the book of Acts, the Gospels, all of that is discourse. And so we will get into some of those things here. You start talking about story as far as the plot and different things like that. So again, we'll get into more of that next week. I'm just kind of looking. I'll do a short little tutorial on that as well. So guys, I hope that you found this helpful as you do your homework. You can kind of keep these things in mind. Again, hopefully you can find 40. You know, this little S here, if you've seen that as subject. I think you can find 40 fairly easy, especially just by doing verbs, you know, if you look at the verbs. So I hope this helps, and God bless you. Happy hunting, and we'll see you on Tuesday. Peace out.